Hi, my name is Beryl Nekesa. I am a software engineer at Microsoft. I am here to inspire people to partake software engineering courses, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are
Merry
you?
Christmas.
Merry Christmas. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
Yes. Thank you for having us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
You started by telling us you're a software engineer.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Software engineering. Software engineering is basically writing programs for computers. So basically a computer is dumb, that's what we say. So basically it's just giving instructions to a computer, and whatever you tell it, it's what it's gonna give out. So that is like the basic introduction to software engineering.
And for how long have you been doing this?
So if I started my first year in 2016, that should be about 6 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how has the journey been for you?
The journey has been crazy. I wouldn't even lie. The journey began when I started computer science, University of Nairobi. I had not been introduced to coding just before joining campus. So it was my very first time hearing about coding. So I just got into this world where I was like, okay, software engineering. But compared to my friends who had prior introduction, for me it was a bit new. So I just got introduction to it while in school, and it wasn't good introduction. It was like where the lecturer would just assume everyone knows what he was talking about, and some of us were really floating. So it was tough. It was hard. Actually, I used to hate it because I didn't understand what was going on, and no one offered that good introduction to me. So I really struggled all the way up to my fourth year. So yeah, I was just basically doing it for, so that I could submit the assignments or just eventually graduate. But yeah, I really struggled throughout it. And I almost dropped out at second year. That's like the funny bit of it. I almost dropped out because I was like, okay, this thing doesn't make sense, So I was like, okay, I will still stay in tech, but I wanted to do something a bit softer. In quotes. So
And it's called software engineering.
Yeah, you'd think it's soft, but no, it was not. It was so hard. So yeah.
And now you said the introduction bit. So for someone who is still in school, could you give us like an introduction bit to understand what really is software engineering?
So software engineering, okay, now that we have a lot of technology has kind of been a part of us right now as compared to, let's say, 20 years ago. So most people know about apps, they know about websites, they know about web applications. So basically software engineering is what makes that to be what it is. And there's a whole lot of aspects if you want to go deeper into it. There's what you see with what we call the front-end development. And then there's also what happens now in the background when you send your friend like a follow request, what happens after you click on that? So there's so much that happens, and that is now what we call the back end side of things. So it's basically how you come up with applications, how you come up with software that is, being used by almost everyone right now. So everyone knows at least. Yeah. So that's software engineering basically is what now makes that to happen. Yeah.
And now for an individual like you, was it a passion you started in high school, or how did it come to life?
Well, compared to many people where there's always passion, for me it was, the way you go to high school and then you're called to do certain courses if you're government sponsored. Yeah. So I wanted to do medicine initially, but I did not get the cutoff points. I had missed like 2 points. So I was like, okay, what else are we going to do? So I called a friend of mine, my best friend at the time, and I was like, okay, what have you selected? And she was like, yeah, I've selected computer science. And because her brother was doing computer science, I think that's the influence she got. And so because for me, I was like in a point where there was no way I was going to get advice on what to pick. So I was like, better just put it as the first option. I mean, if they call me, I'm bright, I'll just figure my way around. So that's how I landed. I selected computer science, UN, and then funny enough, I was called to study it. And yeah, I just showed up, and that's how I'm here.
Now for computer science, is software engineering part of it, or it's like two different things?
I would say it's it's neither here nor there, because you could have studied computer science and still pursue software engineering, but computer science kind of goes into the basics of how a computer works, because then again you start doing things like low language things. Okay, I don't want to go to the details of it, but it's like you go deeper and understand why do you have to do this in a certain way. But yeah, but they're mostly similar, because you could find someone who studied computer science and they're still performing careers that are in software engineering and back
So
end
it's
stuff.
not too far from
They're
each other.
not too far from each other.
Alright.
Yeah.
You've mentioned languages earlier before. What are these languages first?
So, you know, the way we have different languages in Kenya,
Yeah.
there are different ways to talk to a computer or give instructions to a computer. So basically, that's what different programming languages are. But so programming languages are categorized in different categories, right? We have like one is called object-oriented, we have functional, we have procedural. So depending on what you want to build, now you pick a language based on what you want to build. So for example, if you want to build a mobile app, there's a language that is most suitable for it. If you want to build a web application, there's also a language that is most suitable to it. And also how it just interacts with memory and all that kind of stuff. So it's scenario specific. So you pick a language based on what you want to build. Yeah.
And JavaScript, the one that we are used
JavaScript,
to
that's what, and it's like the most popular.
Exactly.
So initially I mentioned about front end. So what you see when you interact with an app or a website or whatever. So we have the front end side, which basically is what you see, like the buttons, the links and all that stuff. So JavaScript is what is used to make that page dynamic. Like you do something and then something happens, like a graphic and all that kind of stuff. So JavaScript is just a scripting language that is used to make dynamic pages for the web content.
All right.
Yeah.
And now for you, are you mostly a web developer, an app developer?
Okay, so I fall under web applications development. I've mostly interacted with web development, and that's like front end, both front end and back end. Mostly back end, but you know, sometimes you're given tasks that touch both on front end and a bit of back end. So it's just good to know what's going on in which side. But there are people who specialize mostly on back end, so they're back end developers, and those who specialize, like the JavaScript developers, they just focus entirely on front end, and them is just to make things beautiful and appealing to the user's eye. And then, so it depends with whatever you find to be interesting to you. Yeah.
This career, just hearing the word engineer, we associate it to the men.
Yeah.
How has it been for you interacting in such a space?
Well, it has had its share of challenges. I will not lie. Even at second year, when I wanted to drop out, it's because you are like 8 in a class of 60. You know, so it's like it reaches a point where things get hard, and then you just convince yourself and you're like, oh, maybe this is just a guy's thing. Maybe I'm just forcing, you know. But then we have that. So we usually have like women in tech kind of forums where, you know, we would meet and mentor each other in that kind of space. But but also there are some guys who are allies. So it's like the guys also help you to kind of, you know, upskill and teach you stuff. So in as much as there's that, like we are a bit of the minority, there's also a way that it all works out. Yeah.
And are there certain skills that a software engineer has to have, or they have to know before they get into the field?
Math.
You can shun away from it.
I think math is just life. I mean, okay, I wouldn't say entirely, but sometimes you need math to make, let's say, your algorithms to work faster. It helps if you have the math, but it's not entirely necessary, I would say. But it's an advantage if you have math. But also these things you are taught as you go along, and even as you code. So the thing that comes about is you have to be consistent. I think that's a skill that you need to have, patience and consistency. You know, okay, because everything you learn at the job or as you do your projects or as you build stuff, but consistency, because coding is like math. You practice it, you have to keep on practicing, because you can't code today and then code in 3 weeks and expect to, you know, you have to kind of build that muscle. So it's like consistency and patience, because you also need that patience to learn and be patient with yourself, run into bugs and wake up the next day and try again. So yeah, I would say consistency and patience.
All right.
Yeah.
And is it more rewarding being self-employed or when employed in such a field?
of course, both of them has its own pros and cons. When you're employed, then you don't have to think about clients and getting all this stuff. You're just given work and it's like, this is what you have to do. But then self-employed, there's also its own challenges where you have to go out and seek clients. You also have to, basically you're doing everything. And that's mostly what we call a startup, because it's a bit small and it's like you have to kind of do everything. I've worked in a startup, so at least I saw what the founders used to do. But then being employed also, but I guess it depends with the person, because there are some people who will be leaving employment and going into self-employed. Even if it's like big tech companies, they would still rather they work for a period of time and then they go to self-employment. So I think it depends with what someone wants.
All right.
Yeah.
I'd like to know of your journey since you finished school and now to where you are in your place of employment.
Okay, so I think the things that we can remember is women are fewer in the software engineering space, which is also one of the things that made me want to kind of, I was like, maybe I would go to maybe data science. So data science is another branch in computing. So I wanted to, because of that, it was like, okay, yeah, this is pretty obvious. So when I finished, when I was towards finishing my 4th year, this is like when COVID hit, I was like, okay, a friend of mine who was an intern at Microsoft told me that there's this program that's coming up. So, and she was like, apply. So when the applications opened up, I applied. But then I saw the requirements and they wanted people who had finished school. They had all this bunch of requirements that I barely met. So I was like, okay, but anyway, I applied.
Yeah.
So this program was called Microsoft Leap. So Microsoft's headquarters is in Redmond, Washington, US. And so it's usually done there. But now they wanted to start one in Kenya. So this was the very first cohort. So I applied, I did a bunch of interviews and I wasn't really confident, but yeah, eventually I got in. I was just doing it, but I was like, okay, they're not going to pick me. I'm still in school and they want people who had finished school. So I joined this program in 2020. And this program is what kind of shifted everything.
This is during COVID.
This is during COVID. This is when you're doing classes online. This is when the world is like in a standstill. Yes. This is when now my career kind of took a shift, because when I joined that program, our trainer was a woman and she was brilliant. She was, what I say up to date is I've never met a software engineer who's as good as she is.
And she's a lady.
She's a lady. And I was like, sis, you mean? Okay. All right. So it was like, we used to bring her problems from some sites and then we would try to solve together. And there's no day she couldn't solve any problem, no matter how hard we thought that problem was. And she just made those problems to look very trivial. And I was like, okay, so if she can do it, that means I can do it. And I think that's why it's important for inclusion, diversity, because the more you see people who look like you being able to do stuff, then it encourages you, either knowingly or unknowingly. So she was pretty good and she supported us and all that. So we were 10 ladies in that program. So all of us, we used to meet up every day, do some questions, and at the end of the day, it became a part of us. Like I just enjoyed coding. Like I'd be just taking a walk and I'm just thinking, how am I going to solve that problem? And this is a person who hated coding. Yeah. I never liked it. I used to say, I was ready. I was like, Mom, it's done. But, just getting a community that we would meet together and I could see the determination of the other girls. And I was like, oh, wow. So you mean this is possible? Like there's hope. So that's how I just started doing it day in, day out. I even got confidence to now start applying for jobs and starting for applying for positions. And of course, with the support from Microsoft Leap, it was just a fresh air, to be honest, because it's like, all these ladies and they're doing it and they're killing it. They're just not doing it, they're killing it. So I was like, oh wow, this is pretty awesome. Yeah.
Right. And since, do you work remotely or do you have to go to the office like every single day?
No, I don't need to go to the office every day. I go there like 3 times or twice a week, and then sometimes I work completely from home, and sometimes it's like 3 to it depends with what's going on in the office, because I'm also very extroverted. So sometimes when I stay in the house, I miss the social aspect of things. So I go to the office for my social needs and then meet up with my teammates, have lunch with them, and then just come back. But sometimes I work from home as well. Yeah.
And now the fact that you're working from home, does it give you a leeway for you to also work on 2 projects concurrently?
Not necessarily. So for the way my team is set up, we have a team also in Redmond. So half of our team is there, half of our team is here. So you find like you're working during the day and also during the evening, you also have to meet with the other guys. So it's like your time is so limited because you also need to rest, you also need to do the things you love, and also you need to do work that sometimes extends all the way into the night. So it's pretty hard. But yeah, I think personal projects to kind of just help myself grow in terms of my skills and all that. Like we said, it's like math, you have to keep on practicing. So consistency is key. So yeah, but in terms of leeway to do that is pretty small. Yeah.
We see coders, we see programmers, anything to do with computers, you'll just find them in a computer glued. And you're extroverted. Make it sense.
Make it make sense. Okay. Well, I get this a lot. People know I am extroverted. Like if you go to the office, I have this laughter that you will know Beryl is here. So I think there's always a place for that, because when you are trying to solve an algorithm or a problem, you need that concentration. I get where they're coming from. Because for me, it's like when I'm meeting people, of course, these are people, these are not computers. But then when you're in the process of trying to solve something, I think where the logical part now kicks in, it's like you need concentration, you need silence, you just need to focus, but it can't be all the time. It's like there's a place for that. So it's like when you're doing this, then there's time for this. But when you're out for lunch or when you're meeting your colleagues on the hallway, I mean, it's different. It's very different. So there's a place for that.
All right. Yeah. And at what point can one consider themselves as a pro, or by climbing certain levels, you discover, by the way, there's growth, there's growth.
I think what I mentioned, consistency. When you keep on doing, you become better. You become better eventually. But I wouldn't say there's a place where someone can now say that they have reached at that level, because we have this, all programmers know we have Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is where you get questions that someone asked, and then there's people who've provided solution. So even software engineers, like senior software engineers, you'd find them also checking, because sometimes it's not a matter of not knowing, it's just forgetting. Because sometimes we also encourage you don't have to know these things all at once. You get to know them, but then you see when you do them over and over again, these things become now a part of you. That's where consistency comes in. But in case you're stuck, you can always ask. We have a whole forum, Stack Overflow, where we just ask questions and then other programmers would give you solutions and all that stuff. So it's always, what I've come to realize, it's always a learning process. That's something about coding. Like if you want to do it, you have to have that open mindset of always learning, because you learn something that you didn't know yesterday and it would actually be better than what you actually had. So yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that in programming, things are changing every single day. So does it mean that every single day we have training going on to show you that there's advancement in certain things?
Yeah, definitely. Tech is one of the fields where things are constantly changing. But in terms of programming, let's say, and coding, in as much as they're different languages, fundamentally they're all the same, because it's like a language, this is how you do it in this way, but this is how you do it in this way. But fundamentally what you're doing is a concept in computing. So that's why if you understand the concepts well of the fundamentals, moving from different languages now becomes easy, because it's like, okay, this is just a function, this is just how you call things here, this is how you do certain things. So it's about understanding first the fundamentals, but then all these things about technology keeps on changing. Once you understand the fundamentals, it becomes easier to grasp on how things are moving, because they're just moving on the same trajectory on the fundamentals.
And how long can it take someone to learn one language?
Now it depends with how much effort you put in, because I know people who've said online they learned for 3 months, especially if you have a good support system, or if you have a good mentor, or if you have a good trainer. It all depends. And also there are so many resources online. There's like Moringa School right now.
Yeah.
Like the materials are so many out there. So it just depends with how much effort someone puts and what is their support system. So it can take as little as even a month. You understand? And it can also take as long as a year, depending on how much effort you put in. Yeah.
And can it be self-taught?
Oh yeah, I've heard of so many self-taught developers. It doesn't have to necessarily be in a school setup, doesn't necessarily have to be in a training setup, but even self-taught. So many people are actually self-taught, and they're actually doing pretty well. So yeah, if it's something that can help fast track the process for someone, then so be it.
And now for employment, because someone will say, I'm in school, and after this, what next? Where are the opportunities?
Opportunities are everywhere, I would say. Even LinkedIn right now, it's like one of the platforms that really connects people with people who, like, you can be able to see someone you want to kind of be like and actually approach them, which has made it easier. But I would say tech events and tech forums. That's where you get to meet people who do what you want to do. So if you're in school, especially if you're doing tech, I would really encourage them to check Kamilimu out. Kamilimu isn't the whole hassle, because it will give you a mentor, it will give you a peer mentor, it will give you a professional mentor, and it was founded by actually a lady who's like one of the few ladies who have PhDs in Kenya in computer science. So she's called Dr. Chaumbogo, and she's doing a brilliant job in that space. So, just getting that, especially if you're in school, just checking out, because now they've opened applications. Now they're taking students from all over Kenya, which has made it pretty interesting, if you ask me. And also, while in that cohort, you get to get professional speakers. Now you meet people from different companies, and they're just able to talk to students. So it's a 6-month program, a structured mentorship that's really, really helpful.
Does it cost, or it's just
No, it's free. It's free. You just apply, have to have like good application, and then you're selected.
All right. Yeah. And do you have mind block while preparing or while coding?
Oh yeah, all the time. It happens. Like sometimes you're just doing something and then it's like, okay, this one is not working. Now the bugs now come in. So most of the times it's just like you're just tired, and you realize that even if you sleep on it and maybe you wake up in the morning, you're able to solve that thing that was disturbing you the night before or the previous day. So sometimes it's really advised, like when you've spent a lot of time, just take some rest and come back with fresh eyes. Sometimes it might help, or even peer programming, where now it's like you and I are coding, and then you're able to look at my code. You might be able to spot something that I have not seen because I'm biased because it's my code. So there's something that you can be able to point out. So peer programming is also encouraged, especially even when you're working in a team. Or if it persists, you just go check it online. There's so many resources and help that you can also get online.
And is there a certain field which is most in demand when it comes to computing?
Right now, I would say software engineering, because it's like technology has become very invasive right now. So it's like everyone wants software engineers, everyone wants to build this stuff, everyone wants a site, everyone wants this. So, and that calls for understanding of how things work. And I think that's why right now there's a high demand for software engineers.
And can I get a job while still at school?
Yeah. Even without, I know some people who have jobs even without undergrad degree. It's like they're just self-taught, and it's like, okay, can you be able to build this stuff? And they're like, yeah, I can. And then they go through the interviews, they pass. I mean, why not? So it's not like the traditional way of doing things. It's like now we have to think about different ways of doing things. It's no longer like like maybe 10 years ago where you'd have to do this to get here. It's like if you can able to fast track your journey, then so be it.
And now what next? Are you planning to do a master's, PhD, or we take a break fast?
Well, that's a good question. I've been really thinking about it, because at the end of it all, it just depends with what you want as a person. If If academia is maybe something I want to pursue, definitely I would want to pursue it. But it's still something I'm still thinking about. It's like, okay, I also want to gain experience so that even as you go for your master's, it's like, okay, you have industry experience, and then now it's when now you can add your additional education. Yeah.
Are you mostly, when you're looking for a job, do you mostly look for like in tech companies or even the corporate world?
So personally, I prefer tech companies.
Okay.
I prefer it because I feel like it will help me grow, you know. I have friends who work in corporate, and sometimes they're given tasks that are not necessarily in software engineering. But if it's a tech company, it's like, okay, I'll be given this task, I'll have to implement them, and I can even seek help in this manner because we kind of have like a hierarchy of, people in different levels. You have your senior engineers, like there's a whole lot of support, and it's like, okay, this is our shared goal. So for me, I think I prefer tech companies, but I mean, things change, if you can't speak for 5 years, but right now I think tech companies makes more sense to me. Yeah.
Right.
Especially when starting out. Yeah.
And it's okay for me to start as a startup and grow.
It's okay to start anywhere. That's what I would say. For me, I started at a startup, and okay, for beginning, I think it's a good thing because in a startup, you end up doing most of the work. You design, you implement, you talk with the customers, you test your code, you deploy, like you basically do everything. But now when you work in like a big company, you'll only be handling a certain smaller aspect of what is going on. But a startup will kind of give you an overhaul of what is there to do actually in this whole thing. Yeah.
And what are some of the lessons that you learned from software engineering that has allowed you to be this successful?
So first thing for me is community. Mentorship, community goes hand in hand. I think for me, one thing I really pursued was community and mentorship, simply because it can be so hard sometimes to do things on your own. And sometimes you just need people to encourage you, to just push you on. It's like you're not alone, we're all in this together. Like, let's go together. We can even go further. Because, you can try coding and then you're stuck, and then it's like you don't have anyone to ask, you give up. But if you have a community and it's like, okay, now I'm even seeing how they're thinking, now I learn from them. So community has been a really, really great thing for me. Another thing is intrinsic motivation. In as much as you can get all the support that comes outside, it also needs to come from you, because no one can force you to get what is out there. How bad do you want it? And do you even want it? So I think also that just, kujikakamua tu, like, kujiskuma. Imagine huwezi kaa tu ati, yeah, I mean, you have to look for these opportunities. You have to put yourself out there. You have to go for them, because even when I was applying for that program, I would have cancelled myself. So for me, it's usually like, let me put myself out there. If it's a no, let it come from them, not from me. Like, that's their problem, but it's not me. So I always go for things that I think are way beyond my approach, just to challenge myself. I mean, it can only go two ways. It's either yes or a no. But people tend to be scared. So I think for me, it's always like, I'm always like, yeah, I can get anything I want, so long as I put in the work and I go for it. Another thing, maybe, is just cultivating a growth mindset. Like, don't be stuck up on what you think. There's a lot out there that you can learn. So the moment you just accept that, there's a lot out there for me to gain. It's not all the time you think like I am the know-it-all, like I know everything. Don't tell me anything. No, it's like there's so much out there. Just read books. Even for me, like right now, I'm reading a book here, and it's outside the tech space. I'm like, okay, what are other people doing outside? Like, tech is not the only thing. What else is going on in the world? And even in the tech space, what else can you learn? So just cultivating that growth mindset that, okay, yeah, I can improve on what I already have, or I can even rethink what I already know. So I think those are the valuable things that I've learned.
All right. Thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you for having me as well. This was so much fun.
Has been a very splendid conversation regarding software engineering.
Will you try it out?
I might. Because most
I
of
will
the
be your community.
I think I will need this, considering that more women should actually join this space.
Definitely.
Let's not limit ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, why?
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 For who?
I mean, why?
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you so much.
And thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
This has been Meet the HR Show with me, Laura Nell. Until next time, bye and Merry Christmas.